Michael C. Hall is typically excellent as David Kammerer, and I'm pleased to welcome him here to Studio Q. Hello, sir.
Hi.
Nice to have you in person here.
Nice to be here. Yeah, nice to see you.
uh, what an interesting film this is. The murder at the heart of this film is a notorious one. It's frequently talked about in the context of the beats. Allen Ginsberg, William S. Burroughs, Jack Kerouac, Lucien Carr all had a connection to David Kammerer, your character. And I guess, though many of the themes in this movie are familiar to those who followed your career, this time you're the victim
Yeah.
of a murder. Why did this role appeal to you?
Well, it appealed to me, I think, in part because I went through my period of fascination and exploration regarding the beats and was aware of this particular story and amazed that it had never been told in this way. So I was excited to read the script, excited that it, among other things, aspired to humanize and arguably sympathize David Kammerer, or at least paint him as more than just mustache-twirling predator, you know. And the fact that I got to turn the tables on myself and the first frames of the film show my character dead had its appeal in a twisted way, given that I'd been spending so much time simulating being the murderer rather than the murdered. So yeah, all those things came together along with just an enthusiasm about John Krikidis as a director and his energy.
When you're dealing with a murder and you're the victim that exists, resides in history, this really happened, is there a different kind of responsibility that comes to you as an actor that you wouldn't feel if it was a fictional character?
I think so. This movie is populated for the most part by individuals who would later become icons, sort of before they were icons. In the case of Kammerer, he died around this time, obviously, and relatively little is known about him, but there was enough to go on to make informed, imaginative decisions about who this guy was based on some real-time accounts that Ginsberg provides in his journals when he met Kammerer for the first time, and some other accounts of his life leading up to his time in New York and his relationship to Carr from, when Carr was a pre-adolescent and Kammerer was a younger man. There were blanks to fill in for sure, but I felt like I was able to make enough sense out of the bits and pieces I did know to fill in those blanks in an informed way.
So when the blanks exist, and as you said earlier, that there isn't a lot of history. We know he died. We don't know a lot of the nuances about it. Do you go on instinct at some point? How do you shape this character in your mind?
I think Kammerer was a guy who was making the scene along with the rest of them. He wasn't enrolled in Columbia University. He was working as a janitor slash superintendent of a building, and he was, in some sense, in a way that was perhaps self-appointed, but he was working for Lucian, and that he was doing a lot of his schoolwork for him. And I think David Kammerer was a guy who was possessed of an intellect that was comparable to the people he was surrounded with, but he was lovesick. He was an addict of sorts, not to a particular substance, but to a particular feeling, one that was no longer being reciprocated by Lucian Carr, the object of his affection. So we're seeing this sort of insidious and destructive power of unrequited and arguably inappropriate love. And it's a tough thing to consider, but I think while maybe not to this degree, we can all relate to the phenomenon of chasing a feeling that's no longer really there for us or not being returned.
Two steps back, Michael. A second ago, you had a bit of a smile on your face when you said, you thought it'd be fun for the audience to see you dead, your character in a film dead, in contrast or in contradistinction to what we know of Dexter, the serial killer. How conscious are you at this point of wanting to play against the character that people have known internationally for the last 8 years?
Well, this is a gay-themed movie and a movie that centers around a murder. And I think if I had hard and fast rules about avoiding themes that characterized either 6 Feet Under or Dexter, I would have dismissed this role out of hand. But there was something about the story as a whole and the character specifically that were too compelling to pass up. So, in as much as I might be flying in the face of my type or the type of things I do, I maybe relish that chance.
Well, then maybe on that note, was there something you learned from spending years inside the head of a fictional murderer that helps you understand or create an empathetic portrait of a victim?
Perhaps, yeah. I think, while a victim of a murder, David Kammerer has, I think, been characterized as much as a villain as anything else. That probably has something to do with the story that's been told from the trial onward about him, and he's obviously not there to speak up for himself. And I think it's undeniable that he had an unhealthy compulsion and obsession with. But I think as far as Dexter goes, maybe with Lucien Carr. Yeah, and I think as far as Dexter goes, it probably, along with surrounding himself with victims, I think the common thread is maybe more about unmanageable compulsion or obsession. I mean, Dexter has an undeniable and unmanageable in the sense that he can't be rehabilitated compulsion to kill, and David Kammerer has a compulsion to try and cultivate a feeling that's not really there anymore. But yeah, it's simultaneously similar and diametrically opposed.
What did you learn about the story of Kammerer, post his death? I mean, the film explores this ethical dilemma that Ginsberg, Burroughs, Kerouac face when their buddy Lucien murders your character, David. Each of them have this choice to make: help their friend cover up the crime, or let the truth be known. It's obvious it's a brutal murder. Why was there any hesitation to tell the truth? Why is there any moral ambiguity?
Well, I think I speculate that there was a sense that David Kammerer was going to follow him wherever he went. That they did, while maybe they took issue with what Lucien Carr ultimately did in murdering him, they did sympathize with the degree to which Carr felt backed into a corner by David Kammerer's obsession. And
he becomes somewhat of a predator.
Yeah, and he was a dear friend, or they were dear friends with both men to a degree. And once one of them was gone and dead, I think their allegiances fell with the one who remained. And I mean, it certainly is a morally gray picture that the story presents, which is a part of its appeal for me.
It's fascinating to watch how Allen Ginsberg, played by Daniel Radcliffe, begins college as this studious, wide-eyed freshman, transforms into a radical thinker. You met Ginsberg.
I did.
In the 90s. You were in college. You were a graduate student.
Yeah.
What was your impression of him?
Well, he was larger than life at that point. He was well on the other side of where we meet him in Kill Your Darlings, and an icon, established one for several decades at that point. But he was very centered, remarkably articulate, as we know, and very generous and very, very present with me, who, I was impressed with that, and as much as I felt like I was just, some kid.
Why were you meeting? Was he
I met
teacher
him. No, he first came to speak at my college. He was invited by a classmate of mine who had a correspondence with him that had started in high school about censorship of some of Ginsberg's books. He happened to be on a tour of the Midwest, and he came and spoke at my friend's high school. My friend wound up apartment sitting for him while Ginsberg was off at his poetry school in Colorado during a couple of subsequent summers, and also worked in his offices. And so he had a day-to-day relationship with him, and I met him met Ginsberg in his apartment on 12th Street in the East Village on one occasion, and on another occasion he actually came over to the apartment we stayed in and took one look at it and told us we had to get out of there. Everybody else was much nicer about it, but he was more to the point, which I admired. But yeah, I was very, to be honest, awestruck and nervous meeting him.
Were you a fan?
Yeah, I'd spent some time in the years leading up to that familiarizing myself with the beats, and was fascinated by not just the work that they'd done, but the atmosphere in which that work seemed to have happened, and the camaraderie they had.
You said earlier that you were for a period fascinated by the Beat Generation, and you and I are around the same age, and I feel like the same way, like I missed something there by being born too late.
Yeah.
You know, with you read On the Road or something, and you sort of go, man, this would be an interesting time to be alive. Can you distill it beyond the atmosphere, as you say, what it is about that time that makes you wish that you had been there?
Yeah, well, I think, we're still living in a time where we're experiencing or enjoying or dealing with the ripple effects of the appetites and sensibilities that they initiated. But I look at the things they wrote, the ways they were thinking, the ways they were living. They're sort of inspirational now in terms of a model for what it means to challenge convention and foster a sense of genuine community. And these guys were doing it initially in the 40s. I mean, it's a remarkable thing in the pre-Eisenhower era that they were, living in a very buttoned-up America, and their appetite for sort of responsible rebellion is I think something that remains inspirational, and to fantasize being a part of the genesis of that cultural movement that's still very much alive and working on people today is pretty seductive.
But it's something else too, in the sense that we ostensibly live in an era where it's open season on information, where we're exploring things we've never explored, the information superhighway, the internet, etc. And yet it almost seems like that was an era of big ideas that we don't almost societally allow ourselves to think today.
I think that because there are so many different pieces of information, maybe we can't quite conceive of a time when big ideas could captivate people in the way they did then, because there are so many diversions. I mean, everything's a diversion. Everywhere you go, every destination is a diversion from the other thing, and there are so many things. There are 1,000 different toothpastes to choose from, and it goes on. 1,000 different
we don't
devices.
have the chance to explore one toothpaste.
Yeah. We don't get to all just sort of talk about what it means to use Crest, because there's Colgate and Aim and Gleam and Aquafresh and Arm & Hammer. It goes on.
Is Gleam? Is there Gleam?
Yeah, isn't Gleam a toothpaste? Maybe people don't use that anymore. Maybe that's like,
that might be an American thing.
Yeah, that might be an American.
Sounds very appealing, though.
Yeah, right?
The last time you were on the show, Michael, you mentioned that, and you almost said this, I couldn't tell, but you almost said this as if it was coming as a surprise to you. You were thinking about it in the moment, that when you were in grad school and in high school too, every year that you were in high school and grad school, someone died, someone that you knew. Did making this film connect you to those experiences?
I don't know. I mean, at this point, 6 Feet Under obviously dealt with death, and Dexter did in its way as well. Kill Your Darlings does. A movie I just did, Cold in July, focuses on a guy who, without wanting or even meaning to, shoots and kills an intruder in his house. I play that guy. So it's a way to revisit my relationship as a more everyday person to killing. But I can't deny that death has reared its head maybe a bit more in my life and a bit more consistently in my life than it has in most, and it certainly has done that in the work I've been called upon to do as an actor. I mean, I haven't actively sought things out that are characterized by that in one way or another. And I actually think that roles find us as much as we find roles. So if there's something in me that magnetizes material having to do with death, Well, that's interesting to consider.
But you said an amazing thing the last time you were on this show, and it really stayed with me. And I didn't get to follow it up then, and I'm going to try to now. I mean, you talked about that your sister died before you were born.
Correct.
Your father passed away from cancer when you were 11.
Yes.
You've had your own experience with cancer, now in remission.
Mm-hmm.
When I asked you why you choose roles that seem to connect directly to that history of personal loss, as you've just been talking about now, you said this amazing thing about why you don't shy away from it. Let me play the clip for you. Take a listen.
Well, one of my most exhilarating feelings as a kid was just running full speed into a crashing wave that was just maybe hitting me right in the face. Not gonna kill me, but I could meet it, and so I think there's something about the chance to do this work that reflects that impulse.
It's a really interesting thing to say.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember coming to that, talking to you last time, and it did just sort of happen in the moment. But I do have such a visceral memory of that quickening feeling of coming literally face to. I mean, the ocean doesn't have a face, but face to face with an opposing force and meeting it head on. And I certainly am attracted to things that are initially challenging or aspire to do something that feels impossible to achieve. I know that when Dexter came along, the fact that so many people scratched their heads and wondered how we would pull such a thing off to invite an audience to identify with this serial killer was really the fundamental part of why it was attractive to me. And
do you think running into the waves makes you a better actor?
Yeah, I think so. An appetite an element of collision, an element of leaning into conflict, is inherently dramatic and compelling, and the ways that metaphorically happens in the dramatic work that I've done. I think I do look for that.
Do you think it makes you brave, or is it masochistic somehow? That instinct to I'm going to take the difficult fork in the road, right? The difficult path.
I think those are different words, different sort of angles on the same point of view. Brave or masochistic. Maybe the role in Kill Your Darlings is somewhat masochistic, and as much as you're portraying a unsavory side of what it sometimes means to be human, and really not shying away from that, and called upon me to allow myself to be so self-destructively magnetized by another person who no longer shares my interest in them. That's sort of a limb to put yourself out on. And maybe there is some, I don't know, my girlfriend tells me that I'm unembarrassable, so maybe that works to my advantage sometimes.
Is that right?
Yeah, she does.
But is it true?
Within a certain context, I think within a fictional construct, yeah, I probably am, and I don't know. I think I enjoy doing things that I can tell make people around me uncomfortable sometimes. That's more, I guess, my sense of humor than my work ethic.
I feel comfortable. It's not working right now. You've been too nice a guy. Before I let you go, it's an interesting time for you to be at the Toronto International Film Festival because, of course, you're here talking about Kill Your Darlings, but this is at a collision of events in your life, including, of course, the winding down of this series that has been your life for the last few years, Dexter. And over the past season, Dexter's status as a righteous anti-hero has been slowly eroding. There's been a rising body count of innocent people. Coming out of both Dexter, Kill Your Darlings, and in fact 6 Feet Under to a certain extent, do you feel like you have a greater understanding of human darkness somehow?
A greater simulated experience with it. I think I have been called upon, certainly through Dexter, and maybe in a different way with the other projects, called upon to, mine whatever vein of shadow energy I have. I mean, I always admired the sort of Jungian notion that we are obliged to come to terms with and get to know our shadow side, lest we are run by it. And, unless we crack open whatever our individual bag of shadows might be, they're gonna take us down. uh, and in as much as my work has encouraged me to shine a light on that darkness, or come face to face with it, or run straight into those waves, I've welcomed it, I think, and would like to believe that it's not only enriched whatever work I've done, but enriched me as a person.
Embracing the shadow side is easier when you're unembarrassable.
Yes, and when it's pretend.
Yeah, I know you've been asked for years about the end of Dexter. The next time I speak to you, it will have been done. What's the latest? How are you feeling about it now?
It's a real soup of feelings. There's a sense of sadness, saying goodbye to that family of actors and crew, and we've been living within the context of this show and this world and all that comes with it for nearly a decade. And there's a wistfulness, a pride that I think we collectively take in having continually committed to telling the story and remained invested and never phoned it in, whatever our, waxing and waning of our sort of success in terms of satisfaction with the story we've told. We've always showed up and really committed and recommitted to it. And a sense of relief that I'm no longer obliged to spend half my calendar year simulating arguably justifiable serial murder, and spending the other half knowing that it's on the horizon and in some interior oven keeping it cooking.
How do you hope it's remembered?
I hope it's remembered as a character and a show that gave an audience a unique opportunity to identify with someone who they weren't accustomed to being invited to identify with. I think it's a show that certainly set out to entertain first and foremost, and was an entertaining ride for people to take, but also perhaps in some way encourage them to consider their own relationship to family, to darkness, to their shadow side, and to authenticity. And I don't know, I think different people like it for different reasons, and I wouldn't want to, pigeonhole it. But I have to admit that now that the show is over, a part of me is looking back and thinking, what have I done? Like all these simulated murders. I mean, I know it was make pretend, but playing someone who could get on with his life caused me to kind of get on with it anytime I simulated such a thing. Now that it's over, I'm sort of looking at the body count, and it makes me shudder a little bit.
And what do you want to get on with now? Do you have a vision for that?
Well, as I said, I just did this film in upstate New York called Cold in July. It's a ways away from being released or anything, but that was a lot of fun and a nice change of pace. I'm going to Bangladesh to take part in an installment in a documentary series that Showtime is producing about global warming later this month. And
so you're sticking with the superficial stuff.
Yeah. And the plan is to get back on stage in the new year in New York.
Nice.
It's been a while since I've been able to do that, and I think that will be a lot of fun and a new challenge. And I don't know, taking on projects that have a definitive end in sight is attractive to me now, after having made these open-ended commitments to characters that have taken me 5 years down the road, or even 8 in the case of Dexter. So
It's a great pleasure to see you again.
likewise.
Thank you for doing this.
Sure.